Good evening and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Rebecca Munro and this is Scotland at 7. And tonight I am joined with Kat Cary. Kat, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? I'm ready for school to start. So
Fair enough. And I'm not doing too badly, but we'll start off with our daily coronavirus update and then we'll go into the questions and our top stories. So, as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 2,579,033 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and UK Government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 2,213,606 have been confirmed negative. 365,427 have tested positive. There are 1,567 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test, although not everyone with the virus will display symptoms and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There are 0 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 8,032. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 337 were in hospital last night, 39 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 a.m. this morning, 4,058,482 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 3,467,817 had received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show 130,979 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 26 since yesterday. And this number refers to deaths in all settings, not just hospitals. Now, our first story of this evening is Afghanistan. Thousands of civilians desperate to flee Afghanistan thronged Kabul airport today after the Taliban seized the capital, prompting the US military to suspend evacuations as the United States came under mounting criticism at home over its pullout. Crowds converged on the airport seeking to escape, including some clinging to a US military transport plane as it taxied on the runway, according to footage posted by a media company. Today, 5 people were reported killed in the chaos at the airport. A witness said it was unclear if they had been shot or killed in a stampede. The Taliban's rapid conquest of Kabul follows US President Joe Biden's decision to continue with Trump's planned withdrawal of the US forces after 20 years of war that cost billions of dollars. The speed at which Afghan cities fell in just days and fear of a Taliban crackdown on freedom and speech and women's rights have sparked criticism. The SNP has said Scotland stands ready to play its full part in tackling the Afghanistan humanitarian crisis and has called for an urgent four-nations summit on refugee resettlement in the UK. Ian Blackford MP said it was crucial that the UK government worked with the devolved governments and showed leadership by opening our doors and providing safe routes for resettlement. So, Kat, are the West also culpable in the humanitarian crisis facing the Afghan people, as there was certainly no political will to fill the American void when they pulled out their troops?
yeah, I think that. Yes. Obviously, I think that the U.S. I know for certain that the U.S. has been trying to pull out of Afghanistan for years and years and years, and we were the last ones left, or the U.S. was the last ones left, and multilateralism, the UN forces, something like that. I'm kind of hesitant to advocate for any outside forces policing a different area, but I think that there is definitely a case to be made here at the UN to, have a peacekeeping force there to help out, because they really are leaving Afghanistan in the lurch. And I don't say that as the United States is, I'm saying the whole world is right now. And what we're watching is something that unfortunately has become inevitable because there wasn't a will to stay there. It's not right for the US to be there forever. But if there was a bunch of peacekeeping force there that was agreed upon and welcomed, that's what we're missing the political will for.
Mm. And there are some that are blaming the Afghan army for the fall of Kabul. But could it have gone any other way? Was the Afghan army always going to struggle on its own with the Taliban?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Taliban, this is where it comes into that this is an area that's been in conflict forever, that blaming the Afghan army that had been, dependent on supplies and funding. There's also UK funding has been cut hugely right before this being pulled out. So it's I think it's a bit rich to blame the Afghans for what's happening there right now, because what would we do if somebody came in, hey, we'll help you, we'll fix all your problems because it started to affect us, and then everybody just kind of like slowly trickled away and said, you're on your own. It's not fair to blame them.
Yeah. And the scenes of thousands of Afghans and Western civilians as well trying to escape via military helicopters is quite reminiscent almost of Saigon. But do you think the West will ever learn from past failed military interventions?
I don't think so. I think it's the West right now, but I think that like throughout history, there's always been military interventions. And I just think it's something that's inherently human. And it's one of the big flaws in humanity that we should look out for and be reticent of before we get ourselves into situations. Because I think that this is, no matter if it's done with the best of intentions or with bad intentions, it's something that is kind of inherently human.
And I also noticed in The Guardian today, there was a young woman who talked quite heartbreakingly of hiding her university certificates and her diplomas and her ID cards. And she said that, as a woman, I feel I am the victim of this political war that men started. I have to burn everything I've achieved in 24 years. I mean, this is a tangible fear of another oppressive existence under the Taliban. So what are your thoughts on the future of educated Afghan women?
I think of how bad it was before, September 11th, before it went in, and really nobody had been paying attention to that before then. I hope that people do pay attention now. I hope that, something is done, whether it's, allowing women to, prioritize. I don't like the only women and children, but I do think it's important to prioritize and to recognize how important it is for women to be able to get educated, and how much more difficult and oppressive the regime is there for them. I do think that I heard a woman say, like, in my lifetime, this is done. We're never going to be okay during my lifetime. I don't even know if it's going to be okay during my daughter's lifetime. And this is just a heartbreaking tragedy, and anything that can be done to help Afghan women should be done.
Yeah, and what do you think that the UK government should do? Do you think they might maybe follow Canada's lead and help say, like, no, we're open to refugees coming to our country to help them escape?
It would be great, wouldn't it? But I don't know if there's the will for it. I see the will for it in Scotland. I think Wales has been pretty open. I really haven't been that tuned into Wales and Northern Ireland right now, but I'm not sure. Like, I've seen the stuff coming from the Home Office. I've seen the stuff saying we don't want to set a bad example. Like, well, how is that a bad example? Saying that if you're in a war-torn country, we'll give you refuge as this rich country. Should the UK do that? Yes. Will they? I highly doubt it.
Yeah, and I have to ask though. I don't know if you'll know the answer, but why do you think that they wouldn't? What reason would they possibly have to not do it?
So what I've seen, and I've literally seen this written down, is they said we don't want to encourage other people in other war-torn nations that we have space for them. Like, we don't want to set a precedent saying more people that need to shelter and sanctuary could come into our borders, which, that's a ridiculous, we're in a climate emergency. There's places that are becoming unlivable. Of course, there's going to be more war-torn places. I think that the UK is way too wealthy of a country, and the British Empire has, had an effect on too many countries for this to be a legitimate excuse or a legitimate stance to take.
Yeah. Do you think Brexit as well has maybe had a slight sway in the matters of this as well? I'm
not sure that a Tory government before Brexit would have been any different, honestly. Like, maybe, it might have done a little bit positive or negative, but I don't see Theresa May as the Home Secretary before Brexit being open to having refugees from Afghanistan.
Yeah, and so what are you hoping to see happen with Afghanistan? I know you don't have future vision, but what are you hoping to see maybe happen in the future?
Well, I'm hoping, first of all, we really need especially speaking in Scotland, I think we need to listen to the people of Afghanistan, listen to what they want, right? They need supplies, they need people, they need evacuation, they need safe havens. So depending on what they want and what they need, I think we need multilateral efforts. I think we need, you know, whether or not the UN sends in peacekeeping troops, and we can debate whether that's, positive or negative. For another time, we can debate that for hours. But I think that we need to listen to what they say that they want and they need, like the people on the ground in Afghanistan, and it needs to be a multi-nation approach.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to our next story of this evening. And that is that at least 1,297 people are dead in Haiti earthquake as the death toll climbs. The death toll from a powerful magnitude 7.2 earthquake in Haiti has climbed sharply, with at least 1,297 dead and more than 5,700 injured. The updated figures from Haiti's Office of Civil Protection follow a previous count of 724 dead. People in the Caribbean nation rushed into the streets to seek safety and to help rescue those trapped in the rubble of collapsed homes, hotels and other structures. Saturday's earthquake struck the southwestern part of the poor nation, almost razing some towns and triggering landslides that hampered rescue efforts in two of the hardest hit communities. The disaster added to the plight of Haitians who were already grappling with the coronavirus pandemic, a presidential assassination and a wave of gang violence. The epicentre of the quake was about 78 miles west of the capital of Port-au-Prince, the US Geological Survey said. The widespread damage could worsen by early next week, with the tropical storm Grace predicted to reach Haiti later on today or early Tuesday, bringing torrential rains. Aftershocks were felt throughout the day and through the night. Many people left homeless or frightened that their fractured homes would collapse, stayed in the streets to sleep instead. In the badly damaged coastal town of Les Cayes, some families salvaged their new belongings and spent the night at an open-air football pitch. On Sunday morning, people lined up to buy what little was available: bananas, avocados and water at a local street market. So, Kat, Haiti's had a devastating earthquake in 2010. It had another one in 2018. We're here again. Does this latest earthquake remind us slightly of the fragility of our own existence in the severe climate change, or will it spur us into action, do you think?
I don't know if it'll spur us into action, but I think that you've kind of hit the nail on the head with Haiti has had, the earthquakes aren't necessarily because of climate change, but the increased tropical storms and hurricane hits, those have been, they've been increasing as the climate warms. Wars, assassinations, gang violence, things like that are, there's been research done, and that increases as the temperature gets hotter and the weather is worse. So all of these things, and it's a poor country, France cut ties with it a long, long time ago. It doesn't really have a colonial, Commonwealth heritage or anything where people feel, where any other wealthy nations feel any kind of ownership to it. So I think that this is kind of something that we need to look at just as everyday people and say, and start demanding that something be done, right? Because what have we done, in our lives that have a connection to Haiti? Not much, but that could be us. Yeah, we should take lessons and say all lives are fragile, right? What would we want in that situation? And maybe that there should be a few more efforts, crying out for the people of Haiti, because that it's going to be us in a few years if climate change keeps going the way it's going.
Oh yeah, definitely. The damage of this earthquake is clear. It's extensive. So do you think that there's any aid that the rest of the world can give to start the clear up? I know we're chatting about the foreign aid cuts as well. Is that going to help in a situation like this?
Foreign aid is always in not how much is given, but how it's received and delivered and given to the people. So I think that maybe that should be something that we pay attention to. You don't sit and pat yourself on the back going, oh, well, we sent money. We donated money. It really takes a little bit more effort than that to look and see, well, is there skimming off the top? Is this being used by some gangs to promote gang violence? Is this only being used to help some people? So yeah, there needs to be a little bit more due diligence than just donating money.
Yeah.
by nations or individuals.
Yeah, true. Well, we'll move on to our next story of this evening, and that is that the Westminster is refusing to hand over £145 million in business support to the Scottish Government. The SNP has blasted the Tories as they refuse to immediately hand over £145 million of COVID business support due to the Scotland in Barnett consequentials. In March, the UK government announced a £1.5 billion COVID discretionary business fund for firms outside of the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors. In the announcement was a commitment to pass £145 million of the fund to the Scottish Government in Barnett consequentials. However, that money is yet to arrive, and correspondence from the Scottish Government Minister, Tom Arthur, to SNP MSP Willie Coffey confirms that the Tories will not reveal whether the funds will be allocated to Scotland until the 2021-2022 budget update in the new year, potentially depriving businesses of vital funding for months. Kat, so if, as SNP Willie Coffey claims, the Tories are keeping the £145 million to the new year instead of releasing it as promised in May, I mean, is it fair to assume the Westminster government is putting Scottish businesses out of business on purpose? I mean, why the delay?
It seems like a really weird strategy for a charm offensive, doesn't it? I mean, it is. I mean, we could make all sorts of speculations, but suffice it to say that Scottish businesses don't matter as much to them as they claim they do. You know, whether they spent the money, whether they're withholding it for another reason. You know, whenever I see something where they say that, you know, the Scottish government isn't holding Westminster to account, I'm wondering what's going on behind the scenes, trying to get this budgetary money, trying to get things like this into support Scottish businesses. And I kind of feel like they're holding a lot of us hostage with it in a way.
Yeah, and do you think this could really affect quite a lot of people, or perhaps even certain businesses more than other businesses?
I mean, certainly it's going to be, I don't have any details on that. I'm sorry. I'm not, but I do, like, I have friends that are small business owners, and, you know, depending on the sector that they're in, they're either, either business is booming, but, you know, I think that everybody's had to make extra allowances. They have less customers, fewer customers, stuff like that, where it's expensive. So, you know, they should be getting the money that they promised. And for the UK government to promise the money and then go back on that is just not acceptable.
Yeah, I suppose they've been hit very hard with COVID as well. And so do you, I mean, under the present system, is there any redress for Scottish businesses if this fund arrives too late to save their businesses? What can they do?
I wish I knew the answer to that. That's kind of one of the big reasons. Like, it feels like in this way, the UK government is campaigning for independence for Scotland. I don't really get why they're doing this or in what way, because I don't see another way other than having our own economic powers to, you know, run our own economy.
Yeah, very true. Well, we'll move on to our next story, which is that the majority of Scots oppose the UK government's cut to the universal credit uplift. 2/3 of people in Scotland are opposed to the UK government plans to cut universal credit in October. In a poll by YouGov, 35% of people supported the £20 uplift being maintained until the country's financial position was more stable. 28% of people asked wanted the uplift to be made permanent. Citizens Advice Scotland, who commissioned the polling, said cutting support would mean universal credit's real term values would drop to a lower rate than when it was introduced in 2013. Commenting, SNP, MSP and convener of the Social Security Committee, Neil Gray, said the majority of people in Scotland want the universal credit uplift to be maintained. It is concerning that in the face of this evidence and previous findings that cutting universal credit would plunge 20,000 children in Scotland into poverty, that the Tories are still going ahead with it. So, Kat, I mean, this kind of goes into what we were saying slightly before. I mean, it does indeed appear to be two governments and two populations. I mean, there's Scotland, who support the £20 uplift and would like it to be kept, and the Tory Westminster government, who don't see the benefit of perhaps putting money into the pockets of those most vulnerable. I mean, what do you think about this?
I looked this up because I have no recourse to public funds as a visa holder myself. So I did a little bit of looking this up before the show, and the Tory government had said no assessment has been made on the impact of different regions. And they didn't care. They just said, nope, we didn't do an assessment. We're just not keeping it. So really, I think they're trying to find ways to make, in a very, trying to put this in just political terms, it seems like they're trying to keep the Scottish government occupied with as much as they can do, because I don't think they care very much about the economy here or children going hungry. I don't think they really care about the children going hungry in England either. So, it just goes to show, because they have no excuse. They have no recourse. They just say, nope, we're just not going to do it. There's nothing you can do about it because this is the system you live under.
Yeah, because we also have to remember as well that many families are working, but they're on lower part-time pay. Is this just a sad reflection of Conservative austerity policy once again? Have no lessons really been learnt?
Yeah, I don't think any lessons have been learned. I think that that just during this pandemic, you see all the funding and the budgets and all the money that they could find when they wanted to. Where did it go? It went into some shady pockets of, pals of the people in government, instead of actually going to feed people and to help them. And they've been playing these games with masks and whether one country's on lockdown over the other, instead of just helping people. And, that's one of the reasons I'm really glad I live in Scotland, because if, at least the Scottish government is trying to mitigate that.
Is there anything the Scottish government can really do in this situation?
I really do think that I don't know how much budget the Scottish government has to work with. They've made some really progressive goals and promises in the SNP manifesto, the Greens, if they come into government or not. There's some goals here that they want to achieve. And if the money that is needed for infrastructure, whatever, is needed to keep people from starving, I can't help but think that the Scottish government will probably do that, right? So, it's really sad to think, are they playing politics with children's lives? I think that Westminster is, the Tory government is.
Yeah, that's a scary thought, but yes. And we'll move on to our next story of this evening, and that is that the UK net zero delay has left room for sceptics' attacks. Boris Johnson's delay in publishing the net zero emissions strategy has left a space for climate sceptics to complain, attack and undermine on cost grounds, and other countries could do with seeing more proper leadership from the UK before COP26, the government's independent climate advisor has said. Lord Debon, the Conservative peer and chair of the Climate Change Committee, said critics of the net zero policy had been vocal in the public debate because it hasn't been put into context by the government. Boris Johnson has stuck to Theresa May's policy of reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050, but the government has not yet published a roadmap of policies, a Treasury review of costs, or some of its sectoral strategies. These are now expected in September, just 2 months before the UN talks in Glasgow, after rows with the Treasury about how to spread the cost of changes ranging from green boilers to decarbonising transport. Lord Debon said that there had been a fundamental problem for Alok Sharma to persuade developing countries to sign up to steep emissions cuts when the UK had cut the foreign aid budget. It was a very serious mistake to cut back on overseas aid, he said. The Climate Change Committee's sixth carbon budget analysis found that the future cost savings from no longer having to buy oil and gas will almost offset the £50 billion a year investment needed in low carbon power, transport and home heating across the next 3 decades. It predicts that after investing in net zero policies, the UK's GNP would be only around 4 months behind where it would otherwise have been. So, Kat, the UK net zero delay has led to Green politicians demanding proper leadership from the UK government before COP26. And do you believe that they are right to demand a roadmap of policies and strategies to combat this climate war?
Absolutely. And honestly, what they're talking about, carbon neutral by 2050, that's not even good enough to keep us all alive. We've reached all these record temperatures. It's not even, to use an American phrase, they're kind of playing hot potato, because by the time they release it, it's going to be not enough. And that time will have passed, and then they can do another one and try and set it again. And it does seem like they're trying to not take responsibility and not implement the changes because, and not caring about what less wealthy nations do. They just want to, Tories are all about wealth, right? And keeping wealth for, the UK government in Westminster. And that's what they're doing. I can't really cut it any other way. It's really depressing, but yeah, I don't think they're going to release it until it's actually null and void and useless. And I think the Greens should be demanding it.
Yeah. And the UK government has recently decided again to cut foreign aid. We're coming back to this. And do you think that this could impact developing countries who suffer the most directly from climate change? If we don't help them.
Well, absolutely. And then we keep the borders closed and we don't let anybody come in here. So it's like this snowball, this avalanche of awfulness. Like it just isn't, every step is like, what is the UK taking? Like, what are they doing? They're doing absolutely the worst thing they could do for the climate, for the world, for people that live inside the country, that live outside the country. Like it's really, really upsetting. And yeah, if you look at like a list of what not to do during a climate emergency, I think they tick all the boxes.
So, what do you think it would take then for the UK government to say, no, let's actually be proactive about this? Do you think that there's anything?
No. If, as long as that this is a democracy run in this way, run in this system, not that I'm all for democracy, but like I don't see the system as it is right now doing anything. I think maybe Scottish independence and Welsh independence might help things. Reunited Ireland, because maybe then they won't have the same pull and power to keep putting the brakes on like that.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to our next story of this evening, and that is that Tory Scotland Office Minister is to meet the Campbell Oilfield executives. UK Government Scotland Office Minister David Duguid will meet with Campbell Oilfield executives tomorrow. Development of the oil field has been the subject of criticism over the past few weeks and has become a major issue since the publication of a UN report on climate change warning of a code red for humanity. The Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change report warned that global warming will continue into at least the middle of this century, and that failure to take action to limit CO2 emissions now would mean that the targets set by governments of remaining below 1.5 degrees Celsius of warning will be missed. In a radio interview today, the Tory Bantford Buchan MP said that the entire Campbell oil reserves might not need to be used. So, 132 million tonnes of carbon could be released if Campbell Oilfield gets the go-ahead. Is this acceptable when currently under an IPCC code red for humanity alert?
No. If we were the poorest country, if we were the poorest, the UK was the poorest in the whole wide world, even then, I think that there'd be some serious problems and maybe we'd be prevented from doing it. And then David Duguid's stuff about like, let's pull it out of the ground and then just hold on to it is just so disingenuous. Like, I haven't heard one good argument for this. I haven't heard one good thing. Why are they doing it? To more wealth? Like, well, there's reason, they're cutting all the foreign aid. They're doing all this stuff. Like, why? Why do they need it? It's awful.
Yeah. Nicola Sturgeon wrote to Boris Johnson last week urging him to reassess plans for the new Campbell field. Climate experts have also called on Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak to be a bit more proactive. And again, given the recent severe floods and droughts and wildfires, should the UK and the Scottish government as well act with a bit more extreme urgency? Is this report a bit of a reality check?
I think it is. I think that we need to, the devolved governments and stuff like I think that it's great that activists are putting these hard questions out there. I don't ever want to, silence those voices because they're doing really important work. I think we also have to be realistic and think about, okay, if you're not actually the leader of the nation who's in charge of this, the leader of the UK government, you can't expect everything out of, Nicola Sturgeon's walking a very fine line right now. But what we can demand is that the UK government put a stop to that, where this is where you need to be writing to your MPs and demanding that they stop. This is where we need to like make it hit them in where it hurts. Say that you're not going to vote for them. Even Steve Baker, Mr. Brexit or whatever, is now feeling. His constituents are saying we're going hungry, and he's kind of changing his tune. Like these are the matters where it's so important to like do everything you can and figure out where is the point where they can make the difference. And it's Westminster right now.
Yeah, and do you think that Nicola Sturgeon, I mean, she said that she wants Boris Johnson to reassess the situation, but do you think she should come out and say, no, we are just completely against this, the SNP are against this?
I think that she's saying what she can. I think that she's a very savvy politician, and I think she worded it that way for a reason. If earlier in the episode we talked about all the money that they're holding, all the money that all the cuts they're making. A lot of this will be a cost benefit analysis. Like, okay, how much green infrastructure aren't we going to be able to do if we don't get this? So although I support everybody trying to hold the Scottish government, the First Minister, to account for not having taken a harder line, I think we all need to also recognize that we live in a very strange reality where she has to, walk a very fine line.
And the IPCC found that also diet change will help fight global warming, and methane emissions aren't that far behind carbon emissions. So are you with the scientists that we should maybe start cutting down on our meat and our dairy consumption?
I am very hesitant to ever put the focus on individuals and not systems and governments, because I think that it's a little bit disingenuous to be like, you know what? I know a bunch of people, like, we eat vegan every once in a while. Like, we're not completely vegan in our household, but it's very difficult to find stuff that's not wrapped in non-recyclable plastic. So, is the vegan food industry like, it's not that it's the vegan food industry. I'm sorry, that's the wrong way to put it. But you also don't want to be importing quinoa and amaranth from developing nations where the locals will starve because they're poor nations. So I think eating as local as you can, cutting back on your meat and eating as healthy as you can, having a garden, that's all important. But I think the most important thing is to be putting pressure on the corporations. Watch where you're doing your shopping. Try to not support, industrial agriculture. It's more stuff like that. I think buying local and eating local, gardening, stuff like that. But yeah, more so, write to your representatives and try and, bring it to the world stage and say, these systems are killing the planet. Stop trying to put it on the individuals.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll move on to our next story of today, and that is that schools restart. Scottish pupils returning to school this week, some for the very first time, will start the new academic year with some COVID restrictions still in place. Scotland's Education Secretary has promised face coverings in classrooms will be dropped as soon as possible. Shirley-Anne Somerville said the COVID rules currently in place for 6 weeks after his week's return to school were erring on the side of caution, but if they can be erased earlier, they will. In the meantime, all secondary pupils must continue to wear face coverings at all times and maintain physical distancing of 1 metre from teachers. Children under 12 will not have to wear face coverings in school, but will be asked to keep physical distancing from teachers. The biggest difference pupils and parents will notice in this new school session is changes to self-isolation rules, with the blanket self-isolation of whole classes following a positive COVID test no longer required. This will reduce the level of disruption to schools and children's education. The Education Secretary does not believe a rise in infections will follow the return this year. The majority of council areas go back over the course of this week, with pupils returning in North Lanarkshire, Glasgow and Renfrewshire from today. Many people will be really keen to get their children back to school today, but there are others who might still be a bit anxious because of COVID and the easing of restrictions. So, Kat, you said before the programme that you have some kids going back to school. Are you one that's a bit anxious, or are you quite happy to send them off?
I'm really excited to send them off. And not only that, they're excited to go to school as well. So, I think it's a little bit of both, because some kids are anxious as well. I think that I know that not all school districts are the same and not all areas get the same amount of, funding and money put into the school system. But I think that the teachers are doing their best. I think they're working under extremely difficult circumstances. And I am just so grateful for the work that they've done. Because if I have another year of home learning with my kids, I'm going to lose my mind.
So are you with the Education Secretary that you don't think a rise in infections will follow because of the measures being put in place?
I don't think so, because the measures that I hear are kind of being applied. Like if you look, more people can go to the museum. There's the Fringe Festival's back on, not at full tilt, but there's people out and about. I can hear the rolly suitcases up and down the street again. People are coming to Scotland. So I think that they are being cautious and taking as measured approach as they can. If there are increases, it's just, I think they've done as much as they can to mitigate it. And we kind of have to be realistic that this is a virus. Like, my partner got COVID after having both his vaccinations. I've had it twice, and we've taken every precaution possible. I just think we all have to be a little bit realistic and patient with each other while we get through this. We're all in this together, quite literally.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, like, COVID is still around. So do you think that these changes as well for the self-isolation, this new kind of blanket self-isolation, will that make a huge difference to some students?
I think so. My daughter missed the last week of school because somebody in her class tested positive. And, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but in a year or 2 school years of abnormality, that was like I thought we were finally getting back to normal. And then we have a whole week, the whole last week of school back home. So I think that just having caught the Delta variant in our household in the last month and a half ourselves, I've been very familiar with the steps they take and how they call and the contact tracing. And I think that it's more of a sign of how on top of things they are and how many people are vaccinated rather than being careless.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I should ask, if you've had the Delta variant, I mean, are you all okay now?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I won't say that because I sometimes get tired still, but I don't have I had lingering headaches and stuff. I think, for the most part, we're recovered. Being double vaccinated, my partner recovered the quickest out of our whole, my kids really just had a fever one day and they were fine. But being cautious and following that, and him having both his vaccinations has really helped. And I had one dose. So, it was I got really sick. I'm almost better. I won't be able to tell you if I'm completely better until 3 months from now, but I can for sure say it.
No problem. Well, we'll move on to our next story of this evening, and that is devices for 700,000 children. Work to provide every school pupil in Scotland with a laptop or tablet has started. Education Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville has confirmed discussions with local government and underway to deliver the ambitious commitment which will benefit 700,000 children. The Scottish Government are also considering how to deliver consistent digital infrastructure across Scotland's 2,500 school buildings. The announcement delivers on another commitment for the first 100 days of this government. The Scottish Government has committed that by the end of this parliamentary session, all 700,000 school-aged pupils in Scotland will have access to an appropriate digital device and, where necessary, an internet connection to support their learning. So, Kat, addressing the issue of digital inequality has, of course, been highlighted during the pandemic. And many households had no internet access, or maybe people were making rotas for one device among multiple children. Is this a progressive step forward, and perhaps even an adaptable one, to embrace this sort of new digital age?
Yeah, I would have been more hesitant about this if it hadn't come right after the pandemic, where we were able to get one device for both of our kids, and luckily we only have two. There were households with 5 kids, and I know that it was very difficult for the parents to get through all the schoolwork and to do those rotas. I do think that now it's kind of nice that parents and people school-age children are a little bit more savvy because we've had to be with it. And I do think that the commitment to try and get broadband or to get internet out across Scotland is really important. And I think that that's, you know, they've made some headway in that in the past few months. Sometimes it's not the best. Sometimes it's kind of an ugly, you know, pole put up in the, you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's not the best looking thing in the world, but in the short term, but really it's really important to get these and like, yeah, closing that gap where it doesn't matter how much money you have, you still have access to this stuff. I think it's really important. And as a parent who I didn't really like my kids having anything digital, I was pretty hesitant to them having any access to any kind of tablet or anything. After this lockdown and the home learning that they had to do, I recognized the benefits of it and how used in moderation, used properly, how good it is and how productive it is, because kids like to learn. So if they have access to learning games, you know, supervised in the right amount of time, it's really going to be great, I think, for learning and for like kids having the joy to learn.
Yeah, definitely. And as well as Shirley-Ann Somerville, she's certainly pushing forward to ensure a kind of fair education for all children in Scotland. And it's an ambitious programme. Do you think that this will make a difference in digital inequality and perhaps even close the attainment gap in the SQA results?
Yeah, I can't speak too much to the SQA results because I am learning the education system as my children go through it, and they're just 10 and almost 7. But I think that's going to be a constant struggle, and sometimes schools and these systems of schools have been designed for certain kids to achieve more. I do think that coming from a different school system, I think that Scotland does a lot. And I mean, mostly I've seen it from the primary school perspective of even since, you know, we've lived here 5 years. My son started P1 here. When my daughter started P1, they weren't in desks right away. They were, you know, kind of in a more Montessori like learning station thing. I think that Scotland has taken, you know, has prioritized this, and I hope that it will, you know, result in closing that education attainment gap. I'm hoping that, you know, they'll also do stuff to fix the system, because I think it's more of attacking it from both angles.
Yeah, well, we'll move on to our last story of this evening, and that is that thousands are helped by the Fair Start Scotland. People struggling to secure or retain permanent employment can access free support delivered by trained advisors. The National Employment Service, Fair Start Scotland, provides personalised and tailored support to those who have struggled to find and stay in work due to their personal circumstances. This may include caring commitments, health conditions or disabilities, or other challenges caused by long-term unemployment. A new marketing campaign has launched to ensure more people can access advice and support, including those who may be finding it more difficult to secure and retain employment as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Since launching in April 2018, more than 32,500 people have benefited from free support delivered by trained advisors. So, Kat, I mean, there are many reasons stated why people find it hard to secure a job. So do you think that treating people with dignity and understanding is a good move to begin with?
I do. I think that, and as we talked about earlier in the show, there's a lot of people on universal credit that they're the working poor. I don't know if they call it that here, but that's in America, they call it the working poor. I think it's good that we're recognizing this and dealing with it as a societal issue, as a systematic issue, and not as a personal failure by people, because it's not.
Yeah, true. And I mean, Fair Start Scotland also supports the new employee with a follow-up service for 12 months. So does it seem like it's a bit more that they're caring for you for a bit longer? It's not just, we're going to get you a job into the economy, and it's like, no, we're actually going to support you throughout this with this follow-up 12-month plan.
Yeah, I think it shows a bit of a commitment to actually make this be a workable thing and not just, you know, like a talking point. I think also, honestly, probably providing this follow-on care pays for itself in the long run. It just kind of goes and it tells you how much thought has been put into the program and how much there is support for it to be a success. Because sometimes programs are kind of there as like a bell or a whistle. You know, I'm hoping that this remains to be a workable, successful program that really does help people. And if it's not working for people, I think that they should make sure that they, you know, they let people know about it, you know, and ways to make it better and to improve it. Because, you know,
do you think it's a good stepping off
it's
point?
Great.
Yeah,
it is. I'm on, like I said, I'm a student and I'm on a working visa, like where I can work part-time. So a lot of this is quite a bit beyond me, but just hearing that it's a program that's available to some people is really promising to me, you know, if I ever get permanent residence.
Oh, definitely. Well, that is all for this evening. So thanks, Kat, so much for joining us on today's programme. It's been a pleasure chatting to you and hearing all your thoughts.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks.
And thank you to everyone watching at home. And if you would like to support Broadcasting Scotland a wee bit further, then just follow the link at the bottom of your screen just now. As the more who support us, the more programmes we can make for you. So thanks again to Kat for joining us, and thanks to everyone watching. Have a good night.
How do you mean no more commission?
Well, no one in Scotland can commission an idea. You know, if I went to BBC Scotland and I said, oh, I've got this great idea for a sitcom, I've got this brilliant idea for a drama, you know, there isn't one person in Scotland that can okay it unless it goes through London.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of Full Scottish. What's happening today?
Hello and welcome to the Full Scottish here on Broadcasting Scotland.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
That need, that desire for independence is ever stronger than perhaps it was in 2014. So there's an obligation that we've got to give leadership to that campaign. That's what Nicola Sturgeon, as our First Minister, has been doing.
My feeling about Boris Johnson is he can't be trusted on anything.
That is now and forever will be known as the rape clause.
I'm old enough to remember going into Europe in '73, and I remember how much of a razor's edge that was a battling stone. And I think we made it by 53%, if I remember correctly, for going in. And ever since that time, England particularly has been pretty much schizophrenic, down the middle about whether it felt British or whether it felt European. And that schism, that crack has remained throughout English society ever since.
Scotland means business. Scotland's voice won't be stilled, it won't be silenced, it has to be heard.
About the work that's been done by Broadcasting Scotland in giving community activists, yes activists, Scottish activists a platform other than the traditional media outlets.